The topic of research I'm presenting today is the quality of reproduction of terms from popular scientific texts in machine translation based on the material of TED Talks. In the modern world, information no longer has space-time boundaries. Borders have been erased. People from different parts of the world communicate freely with each other. Mass digitalization of data is taking place. Friends, travel, university, business, all life is now in smartphone. But at the same time, the problem of a common medium becomes more noticeable. The role of common space took upon itself the internet in the form of forums, chats, and social networks like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. But what about the language medium? In order to establish strong relationships and exchange information, people began to develop the science of translation studies. The need for translation is never decreasing. A huge number of people are currently involved in this field. Many specialists are still in the process of training. But the problem arose. The demand for translation in the modern world far exceeds the supply. In order to battle this problem, people began to work on the possibility of automating the translation process. The transfer of information from a foreign language using electronic devices is the latest development in modern translation practice. The relevance of scientific research is determined by the fact that modern machine translation of terms in the field of popular science is still far from ideal, and not enough analyses and studies are conducted to improve its quality. The scientific knowledge lies in improving the understanding of the work of machine translation when translating terms in scientific and popular science videos. The object of research is the machine translation of the terms of popular scientific texts. The subject of research is the analysis of the quality of the reproduction of term in machine translation. The purpose of the study is to assess the quality of machine translation of terms and to identify typical errors. The main tasks of this work are to analyze the theory of definition of the term, its lexical features, to identify and research the main types of translation, the role of translation in society, the features of text containing terms, to consider the problem of equivalence and adequacy during translation, to clarify on what basis the source of text are divided into bad and good, to investigate the peculiarities of the translation of terms and basis of their reproduction in cases when a dictionary equivalent exists and when it does not, to delve into the theory of machine translation, to determine its features, types, and main problems, to form a corpus of research, which will include excerpts from TED Talks lectures, group the selected data into a table, evaluate the machine translation of terms, and analyze errors. Term, concepts, functions, features. The word term was used in ancient times. In Ukraine, this word became widespread in the 18th century. A term can be defined as a word or a phrase used to denote a certain concept of a field of knowledge or human activity. There is a number of features that make the term a special linguistic unit that differs from other words. Its accuracy, systematicity, motivation, and strive for ambiguity. The function of the term in scientific text is to reflect the completion of the scientific and cognitive process. In the scientific and professional space, the term allows to establish understanding between people and improve the process of producing new knowledge. Translation, concepts and types, lexical difficulties. Humanity has been engaged in translation since ancient times, because it has always played a significant role in the development of culture and science of the nation and human civilization in general. In the 20th century, translation activity took a big step forward in its development. Translation is the process of reproducing a text or an oral statement expressed in one language, the original language, in another language, the translation language. The goal of this process is to accurately and completely convey everything contained in the original by means of another language. Translation also denotes finished results of the process. The purpose of the translation itself is to acquaint the reader or listener with the information contained in the text. There are different types of translation: oral, written, machine. There are also the following types of translation: literary, business, advertising, scientific, and technical. Special attention should be paid to scientific and technical translation. It's important for the scientific community that as many scientists as possible have the opportunity to gain new knowledge and continue the scientific discourse. Correct understanding and appropriate reproduction of terms in translation is the most important commandment of a translator of scientific and technical literature. The translation must be clear and concise. The translator's task is primarily a high-quality translation. Such concepts as adequacy and equivalence are used to evaluate the translation. Equivalence is understood as the semantic commonality of the original and the translation. The term adequate translation has a broader meaning. It is used as synonym for good translation, that is, a translation that provides the necessary completeness of interlingual communication. Two situations may arise during the translation of terms. The equivalent of a foreign language term are recorded in dictionaries, and when there are no equivalents. In the second case, the translation can be carried out by the following means: borrowing a term by a method of transcoding, letter by letter or phoneme by phoneme reproduction of a word using the alphabet, calque, literal translation, and descriptive translation, when the term is replaced by a word that conveys its meaning. Machine translation. The current problem of translation is that there are too few human translators and that there is a limit to how much their productivity can be improved without automation. Automation of translation is a social and political necessity for modern societies that do not wish to impose a common language on their members. Machine translation systems perform automatic text translations. A word or phrase is taken as a separate unit. Machine translation systems usually contain bilingual dictionaries with necessary grammatical information, that is, all the rules of the language and algorithms for grammatical analysis. The most important methods of computer translation are direct computer translation, transfer, interlingua, example-based machine translation, and statistical-based machine translation. The development of machine translation rules from one language to another pose a number of problems to linguists: the problem of untranslatability, ambiguities, and the problem of finding an equivalent. The linguistic task of machine translation is to develop a system of rules that would allow adequate translation of the text of one language into another. Today, translation programs are able to construct meaningful phrases, and the quality of translation has improved over the past few years. But the problem of imperfection of such a translation still remains. Therefore, as a rule, the result of machine's work is valued less than a human translation. The quality of reproduction of terms in machine translation. Our study of the quality of reproduction of terms of popular scientific texts in machine translation was conducted on the material of 8 selected educational videos from TED on topics from various fields of science, aviation, biology, physics, and engineering. 110 individual terms were selected from these videos. We evaluated the quality of term reproduction, analyzed errors. It was estimated that the correct translation was achieved in 84% of all words, while 17 words out of 110 were translated with mistakes. Based on the analysis, incorrectly translated terms were grouped into 3 categories, depending on the type of error: inadequate, non-normative, and literal translation. In 7 out of 17 cases, Google Translate made the mistake of translating word literally. So, for example, it translated chase aircraft as «летак преследовать». The dictionary translation with which the comparison was made and which served as a measure of correctness of the translation was «супровидное судно». This demonstrated the need for further work on expanding the translator's vocabulary. Another 7 mistakes were due to non-normative translation. He translated glass cockpit avionics as скляна авіоніка кабіни. The dictionary translation is авіаційна електроніка скляної кабіни екіпажа. We believe that this was the result of either an error during the linguistic analysis of the input text or improper observance of the norms of the Ukrainian language. Other erroneous translations were generally correct, but inadequate in the given context. The main directions in which it is necessary to move in order to improve the machine translation of terms are the work on the acquisition of vocabulary for the translator's bilingual dictionaries, the improvement of the quality of the text analysis, and the continuation of the process of machine learning machine translation systems. In most cases, the translation coincided with the one available in the dictionary and conveyed the meaning of the original word in its original context. In general, the translator adhered to the grammatical rules and requirements of the Ukrainian language. The final text was modern and readable and was able to successfully convey scientific knowledge to its readers. Thank you for your attention.